So we are fast approaching the best day of the year, Christmas Day. Well, it's the best for some people. And to be honest, I've just not been able to get in the Christmas spirit. Even though I'm drinking currently from my mug with some reindeers on it, it just isn't hitting the spot. But you know what does get me in the Christmas mood? A bit of murder and suspense. So I've decided this year to do the 12 Days of Hitchmas. This is going to be a marathon where I celebrate Christmas in style by watching the movies of Alfred Hitchcock. Now, Hitchcock made a ton of movies, but I am picking just 12 to watch over the festive period. I'm going to be watching them with my wife and basically any friends or family members who want to join, including you. So if you want to join in on the 12 Days of Hitchmas, then by all means, have a listen to the films that I have selected for this list and you can watch them too, and we can talk about it. The 12 Days of Christmas, I did a Google search and there's differing opinions on what that 12 days actually means. Some people think it's the 12 days leading up to Christmas Day on the 25th. Some people believe it starts on Christmas Day and goes into the new year to January 6th. So that stuff doesn't matter. Just watch these whenever you want over the period. And after Christmas, I'll do a video talking about all of these movies. So, the Hitchcock film selections. Let's go through them one by one and just have a look at why I've chosen to watch these. So, first up, on the first day of Hitchmas, we are watching Frenzy. This is his penultimate film, the one he made before Family Plot, which was his final film. And this is a very underrated film in Hitchcock's filmography. To tell the truth, I've actually already watched this film and the next one already this Christmas, so I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. But on this rewatch, oh my god, this film is so underrated. And in my opinion, even though this was later on in Hitchcock's career, when he returned to England to make this movie, it is almost a culmination of all of the ideas that he explored in his filmography prior to this. I almost feel like Frenzy is the film that he'd always wanted to make, and everything before that was just leading up to that point. Frenzy is Hitchcock at his most violent, it's his most suspenseful film, it's also his darkest film, and at the same time I think it's his most comic film, where he's exploring a lot of humorous ideas, very darkly comic. If I haven't sold you on doing this 12 Days of Hitchmas, at least please go and check out Frenzy, because I really do think it is a gem in his filmography. So that's number one. On the second day of Hitchmas, we are watching Dial M for Murder. We actually watched this last night, so again, got a bit ahead of myself, but you can catch up. Don't worry. Dial M for Murder is one that is widely considered one of his better films, but I think due to the kind of stagey nature of the story and the setting, because most of it is set in one room, modern audiences don't seem to gravitate towards this one too much. There is so much brilliance in Dial M for Murder. Hitchcock is really using the visual grammar, the visual language to create suspense, and it's just very clever. It's very well put together. Even though it is just in one location, Hitchcock makes it visually interesting through the use of different storytelling techniques in terms of the image. So Dial M for Murder is number 2 on the list. For the third day of Hitchmas, we are watching The Birds. The Birds is one of his most iconic movies, with of course the titular birds being the menace to society in that movie. There are some very interesting techniques used in The Birds to create the suspense and the horror and the feeling of dread, and you can really delve deep into the psychological nature of The Birds. There's a lot of very interesting discussions around the point of view of the birds looking over the city when like the gas station is burning and things like that. There's a lot of great stuff in The Birds, and out of Hitchcock's career, I think it's quite a unique film. On the fourth day of Hitchmas, we go all the way back to the 1930s, all the way back to when he was working in England originally with The Lady Vanishes. For me, this is one of the most cinematic of Hitchcock's movies because it has so many great things that I consider cinematic qualities, namely a train and murder or mystery. So those two things kind of put together make this such a kind of cinematic film. You probably think I'm talking rubbish there. Maybe I am, but this is a great film nonetheless. It's available in the Criterion collection, so I'll be watching it on that Blu-ray, and I can't wait to rewatch this one. It's a film that at the start you feel is quite normal, and then as the film progresses, particularly towards the end, it kind of gets a bit crazy, goes in some mad directions. So The Lady Vanishes, even though it's quite an old film towards the start of his career, there is so much brilliance in that film. Following that, on day 5 of Hitchmas, we are watching Psycho from 1960. Everyone knows this film, and I'm pretty sure anyone watching this video has probably seen that movie. And you might think, well, that's not a Christmassy movie at all. Why are you watching that during the festive season? I don't know, there's something kind of warming about Psycho. Maybe that reveals a bit too much about my own personal character, but I do find something a bit cozy about Psycho. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the setting, maybe it's the kind of nature of the storytelling, how it goes off in a different direction in the middle, and the characters. I'm just so used to this film. It is like returning to, a favourite book or a favourite piece of music. Anyway, on to day number 6 of Hitchmas. We are watching Topaz. Now, Topaz is often talked about as maybe one of Hitchcock's worst movies, I think. And to be honest with you, I watched this so long ago, I can barely remember anything about it. There's another film on this list as well, which is kind of in that vein for me. So in a way, I'm actually most excited to watch Topaz on this list because I want to experience it now, many years after I've watched so many other films. I've now watched basically all of Hitchcock's movies, so I can get a greater appreciation for what he was doing in that film and perhaps what went wrong. Who knows? I'm excited to see what I think about it this time. On day number 7 of Hitchmas, we are watching Suspicion. This is the film from the 1940s with Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine. What a pairing for a movie. Great actors. And again, this is one I watched quite some time ago now. I can't remember all that much about it, but I'm excited to revisit it. By the way, Rebecca is not on this list. So this is the Joan Fontaine movie I've chosen to put on this list. Rebecca, I think, is an absolute masterpiece. One of my favourite Hitchcock movies, but I've decided not to pick Rebecca for this 12-day list. Because, when I was picking the films for this list, Hitchcock just has so many great movies. So I had to leave some out, and Rebecca is sadly one of those casualties. On the 8th day of Hitchmas, we are watching Marnie. This is with Sean Connery and Tippi Hedren. This one I almost feel is kind of underrated as well. Marnie is quite a long film when you look at the duration of it compared to a lot of other Hitchcock movies. And it's quite peculiar because Sean Connery is an actor who I feel like doesn't kind of fit the bill for Hitchcock. And maybe they didn't get on because they never worked again after Marnie. I have no idea. That's pure speculation. But it's an interesting film nonetheless. I don't think it's one of Hitchcock's best, but visually there's a lot of interesting things going on. A lot of things that kind of harken back to his film The Wrong Man, which he made in the 40s, or was it early 50s? Can't remember. But the one with Henry Fonda, which again is not on this list. It could have been on this list very easily. It's a great film. But yeah, Marnie in many ways reminds me of The Wrong Man, just in terms of some shots and the composition and the suspense. Following Marnie, on day number 9 of Hitchmas, we have an absolute joy. It's North by Northwest, widely considered one of his greatest movies. I think this is actually his second highest rated movie after Vertigo, at least in terms of the BFI Sight and Sound poll, which I will be talking about more later on and in future videos. So North by Northwest, absolutely iconic. So many iconic scenes, particularly the one in the field with the crop duster plane. And it's a film that people always talk about being the best James Bond film that's not a James Bond film. Not because Cary Grant is playing a spy. He's playing a man who's kind of just thrown into this world and this plot. But Cary Grant would have made a great James Bond. And I think Hitchcock would have made a great James Bond director. It's a real shame that that never came to be. And of course, it's got the great James Mason in an antagonistic, villain role. And God, he was such a great villain. So I can't wait to revisit this. On day 10 of Hitchmas, we are watching Rope from the 1940s with James Stewart in the leading performance. I think Rope is such a unique film. It's talked about a lot because it was one of the earliest films to do the one-shot. The film is one-shot kind of film. I don't know how to describe it. A film that looks like it was done in one take, even though I don't think they did do it in one take with this. I think there were bits where they actually they tricked it. They spliced film together. I've left this one towards the end of this list because it's actually a great New Year's film in terms of it being set at a party. It feels like it could be at any New Year's Eve party where there's people around a gathering and there's a dead body in the centre of the party and no one knows about it. And will they discover it? Won't they? It's just a great film. In some ways, Rope gets compared to Dial for Murder, which I talked about at the start of this video, because they are both set in one location. And I think a lot of people think that Rope is superior to Dial for Murder. And I think I kind of agree. I think Hitchcock was trying to replicate some of that energy that he had in Rope in Dial for Murder. Anyway, on day 11 of Hitchmas, we are watching Torn Curtain. This is the other film I was talking about when I mentioned Topaz earlier, because this is one that I can barely remember, haven't seen it in ages. And again, like Topaz, it's seen as somewhat of a failure in Hitchcock's filmography. I think that this is largely due to the actors that were cast in this movie. Famously, Hitchcock often didn't go for the biggest names in Hollywood at the time for all of his movies. But Torn Curtain was sort of an exception because you had Paul Newman and you had Julie Andrews. So I think Hitchcock famously struggled working with any actors because Hitchcock had the entire film planned in pre-production before he even got on set. He always talked about how his least favourite part of making a movie was actually filming the movie, because he hated when actors would get in the way. He hated the egos of actors and he hated anything to do with improvisation or method acting, which is why he struggled with working with Montgomery Clift. So yeah, Torn Curtain, a bit of a black sheep in Hitchcock's filmography. So I'm excited to revisit it and actually see, is it as bad as people say it is? And then we get to day 12 of Hitchmas, the last day, saving the best till last. We're watching Vertigo. Vertigo is one of my favourite films of all time. I think it's number 4 on my top films of all time. And that list is always fluctuating, but it's always around there. It's always one of my favourite films. It also happens to be my wife's favourite film, so this is why we're saving it for last. We absolutely love this film, and we haven't watched it this year. I think last time was last year, so I'm excited to rewatch it on the 4K disc, which is just an amazing disc. Famously, it is no longer the greatest film of all time. It has fallen to the number 2 slot on the Sight and Sound poll listings. It's kind of a controversial thing that's happened recently. Some people think Vertigo should still be number 1 on that list. So yeah, I'm excited to revisit one of my favourite films of all time. So there you have it. My 12 days of Hitchmas have already begun. please join me in watching these movies if you'd like. I will do a kind of catch up after this season and talk about what I thought about each one of these films. That may well be a very long video, so I'm excited to delve deep into each one of these. So yeah, please join me if you want, or if you don't want, just leave a comment on this video. Tell me what your favorite Hitchcock movies on this list are, because, you know, I'd love to hear that. If you want to hear more about Hitchcock and my favourite movies of all time, then just click the video that's on screen now. I'm sure you can get plenty of good recommendations for watching movies over the festive period. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.